Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Yes? Anyone who can't hear? Bad luck. Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marion Hercock, and I am with a group called the Civilisationists. And some of you are attending the Civilisationists event for the very first time. Welcome, I should say. Welcome to our winter seminar. The Civilisationists hold about 3, 4, maybe 5 seminars a year, and we may even have a books and writers event this year. If you want to know more about us, there were flyers at the desk at the way in, and you can join our mailing list. We're free to join. There is no membership, there is no formal structure. And just to make sure that you know why you're here tonight, you've come to a seminar about gender ideology and how it is based on lies. Right? Everybody? You're not yes, that's right, Kirralie, not in the wrong place. You think you're in the right place? Good. Look, just a very brief overview about us. The Civilisationists, because we're a very small, informal group, we're basically concerned with reviving Western values, and we are concerned about the takeover of our institutions by anti-Western ideologies, such as Marxism, gender ideology, and Islam. We are secular, we're non-religious, and we don't have any political affiliations. And our values include the Western parliamentary democracy system, the principle of one law for all, equality of race, and primacy of the family. Now, the order of the evening, we've had the social bit at the start, pizzas and pies, and then our guest speaker, Kirralie Smith, will talk. We'll have a short break, and then we'll attend to some questions. Some of you have already submitted questions, and they will be put up on the screen when it comes to question time. And then when we've finished with questions, there'll be more refreshments, some homemade goodies, and hopefully some socialising. So just to get you in the mood for the evening, that's an example of gender ideology in action in the United States of America. The absolute nonsense, the lie that there is such a thing as gender diverse girls. Girls are girls and boys are boys. Simple biology. Now to introduce you to Kirralie. We are really lucky and somewhat honoured to have Kirralie Smith from Binary come and speak to us tonight. Joe and I, and some of you in this room, will have known Kirralie for a little while and might remember her from the days of Australian Liberty Alliance and anti-halal certification. Kirralie is a spokeswoman for Binary Australia. She is an ardent campaigner against the radical gender ideology which harms young people, women, and it harms our society. And of course that is the real agenda, is harming our society. And in 2023 she was announced as Mother of the Year by Family Voice Australia. Now unfortunately Daryl Budge from Family Voice was coming tonight, but he couldn't make it. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'll hand you over to Kirralie Smith.
Yes, it's lovely to see some familiar faces, and sorry if I don't remember your names, but I certainly do remember some lovely faces from the few events that I was able to do over here about a decade ago. So thank you for having me. It's really lovely to be here. Unfortunately, it's not a lovely topic that we get to talk about. Am I able to move that? Maybe not. Yeah, just up to the top there. Now I have notes because this is a massive topic and I could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the fact that gender ideology relies on lies. I'm going to just do some really big broad brush strokes and in one way hopefully overwhelm you with just how full on this ideology has become in our country and the price that many of us are paying for standing up against it. There's so much more. Some of these things you will have heard me say if you know me already. If you've got more than maybe 2 brain cells, you've probably worked it out for yourself as well. But the purpose of tonight is just to put it all together in a package to stir our hearts and to hopefully motivate us and direct us towards some action in these things. It's very glaring. So, gender ideology does rely on lies, and lying is unkind, it's cruel, and it can lead to irreversible harm. Gender ideology denies science, rejects biological reality, and relies on deception to advance its agenda. This isn't rocket science, and I'm saying it very plainly because I think we all need to be equipped with tools to say it very plainly. We don't need to get caught up in really complicated arguments. This is as simple as truth and lies. It's as simple as being kind or cruel. No one can change their sex. Not one sex change surgery has ever worked. There is a 100% failure rate when it comes to sex change surgeries. Males without their penises are still male, and females who have had double mastectomies or grow facial hair are still female. Yes, men can appropriate a whole lot of stereotypes that might appear to look like women, but they don't become women. Females can take drugs and appear masculine, but they don't actually become male. The transgender industry relies on lies and deceives people into a false fantasy world that rarely satisfies the individual who's caught up in it and always negatively impacts the broader society. I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the differences, I guess, of how this ideology affects males and females. And again, there's so much more than what I can say in this short. You might not feel like it's short, but I feel like it's a short speech. Most females who determine to appear male have underlying issues such as autism, trauma, body dysmorphia, or eating disorders. And many of you would be aware that there is a social contagion raging through our schools right now, and girls are especially vulnerable. Entire groups of girls in some schools are transitioning. Entire groups. But up or down? No, don't they? Girls who don't conform to the Barbie stereotypes are believing the lie that they were born in the wrong body. No one's born in the wrong body. There are girls who have seen the violent pornography that too many teenage boys are consuming and are terrified and choose to identify as male to avoid being forced into the demeaning, violent and perverse sexual encounters that are being demanded of them. Girls who have experienced trauma, abuse or rape believe that if they present as male, then that won't happen to them ever again, or perhaps they'll even be able to avoid it in the first place. Girls who are shy, not popular, they're quirky or tomboys. Like, what's happened to the tomboy? So many of you in here would have been tomboys, and that's fantastic. But now these girls have been convinced that they're in the wrong body, and if they appropriate male stereotypes, they'll be more accepted or even celebrated. I can't tell you how many parents say to me that their child was awkward, didn't fit in at school, until they announced that they were transgender or gender fluid. Then the school gave them special privileges, allowed them to come out of uniform, excused bad behaviour for fear of being called transphobic. These children have special days like Wear It Purple days and Ida Hobbit days and Rainbow days and special assemblies and special classrooms where they can shelter if they feel unsafe. Not unsafe from a violence perspective, but unsafe for their feelings. Privileges have been abused and are misused, and the accusations then are thrown against the staff and other students who call out that misuse. Staff and students are compelled to go along with the lie. Yet the fact remains, no one can still change their sex. Now, feelings are real and they are valid, but if we were true about being kind, we would come alongside these young people and help them to embrace the reality and accept themselves as they really are. You know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s where there was such a great movement of accept yourself, you know, love yourself, believe in yourself, and now we're telling children to deny yourself and to become something that you are not and never can be. Instead of reinforcing stereotypes by giving children drugs, we should be encouraging them to express themselves creatively. Be gender non-conforming. That's fine. Who cares? Be a tomboy or be a feminine boy. It's okay. But we should never be intervening medically and interfering with the natural development of these children, because puberty is not a disease. It is a necessary part of human development that every person on the planet must go through to reach maturity. Stunting, pausing or interfering with the natural process does cause untold problems. It is extremely common for girls to be distressed with their body changes, menstruation and emotions that seem out of control. We've all been there, ladies, haven't we? Some of us are still there. It's far from kind, though, to tell such girls lies and suggest that if they take puberty blockers, all their problems will be solved. Not even close. Because if they persist down that pathway, they will end up risking their fertility. Some have atrophied wombs. Their wombs are literally dying inside of them because of these drugs. They will have high cholesterol, brain and bone development issues, among many other physical issues that are even yet to be fully realised, but these are some of the ones that we know are happening. And puberty blockers are being used off-label. They've never been tested and developed for this use. It's only for precocious puberty, and they're being used off-label without the studies, without the data to know what the long-term effects really are. But what we do know, studies have shown us that up to 90% of children who suffer from gender dysphoria will desist once they've gone through puberty if there are no medical interventions. Yet today, in most states in Australia, at some level, children who say they want to change their pronouns then end up on puberty blockers and go on to cross-sex hormones. In Victoria, the ACT and Queensland, it's all been legislated that watchful waiting is out and affirmation-only therapies are in. New South Wales, Tasmania and Western Australia are all heading in the same direction. Let me say, they're all under this misnomer called the conversion therapy bills. Well, I'll say the only conversion therapy going on is by captured politicians and medical practitioners who attempt and fail to convert children from one sex to another. Males who claim to be female also have underlying issues. Again, autism, trauma or depression are often factors that in our current environment are being overlooked in favour of these so-called therapies. I'm missing a slide. That's okay. That's okay. It was really gross. It was a guy dressed up in horrible gear. Okay, so it's okay. No, it's not there. So I've looked at the females. I'll give you a brief overview. For males, there's some overlapping things, but there's some differences as well. And the one that really doesn't get talked about very often, but is one of the leading factors in this transgender ideology, is the fact that males who insist on taking on the female identities have been captured and consume massive amounts of pornography. And I will say it unashamedly that sex is not a spectator sport. We were not designed to watch other people have sex. We were designed to express love in the context of a relationship, and it is the fruit of a healthy relationship, not the substitute for a relationship. Yet children are now being exposed to pornography in bucket loads. And the chemical response, it's more addictive, they say, than a lot of very addictive drugs, but they need an increasing dose to experience any level of satisfaction. So too many males are now buying and selling the lie that they're women because they are consuming this pornography, and they go on to appropriate very hypersexualised stereotypes of the women that arouse them, and it's called autogynephilia. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Helen Joyce. She's amazing, and if you are interested in this area, please read her book and listen to everything she has to say. She's just quite exceptional. I'm going to read a very long quote from her because she says it far better than I can. And so recently she said that autogynephilia, there's this group of men who, they're straight men, and what attracts them, sorry, this microphone, am I doing something wrong? No. And excites them sexually is the idea of themselves as women, because that's their fantasy. It's almost as if they're in love with the woman version of themselves, and that's where all these phrases like, I have a woman inside, come from. It's on a spectrum with erotic cross-dressing, which is a common male sexual interest. Lots of straight men do dress up as women and find it sexy. So some of these men become more and more bought into this fantasy, to the extent that as they get older, it becomes impossible, or they think it's impossible, to live without acting out their fantasy. They don't want to just keep the fantasy woman in their bedroom, or they are going, or just going away with other fellas on cross-dressing weekends. They start sharing pictures of themselves on websites, and then it develops. And to the point where so many men, young and old now, are saying, I really am a woman. This is still part of her quote. What is so unusual and destructive about this sexual desire and urge is that it requires everyone else to play along. That's part of the fantasy. And that's not true of other sexual desires in general. She says, if you're a man whose deepest sexual desire is that he's really a woman, then that man requires everybody, but specifically women, to agree with him. And he doesn't just want to cross-dress, he wants to come into women's only spaces, because he wants to be in the place where his womanhood is validated. So that just doesn't mean that he wants to use the women's toilets or change rooms because it's convenient. It means he wants to use them specifically for validation. They do all these things only women can do because that's what they get off on. And any woman who says, sorry mate, you're a man, which I do, you're not welcome, that woman is striking a blow at the heart of his own self-image and his erotic fantasy as well. And these are hard conversations to have, but these are the exact points that we need to be raising when we're talking to people about this issue. It is fact, it's what's happening, and it's harming women and children beyond our comprehension. I don't know if you've noticed, our news is terrible at reporting on these things, but I suspect a lot of people in this room don't rely on mainstream news sites. But there's an increasing number of men who suddenly discover that they're actually women once they've been caught and charged for rape and sexual assault. Have you seen that? A lot. And our jails in this country are allowing those violent male criminals into women's prisons. But we're not allowed to really say anything about that because we'll get hauled before the courts for hurting their feelings, is the bottom line. There's countless images and stories all over the internet about males being aroused in female spaces such as change rooms and bathrooms. Unfortunately, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, whatever cesspit of social media you want to go to, there is photo after photo after selfie after selfie after selfie of men dressed as women being sexually aroused in our bathrooms or change rooms. How? Why? Because I've heard it. In 2013, Julia Gillard, Australia's first female Prime Minister, who doesn't know what a woman is apparently, one of her very last acts as Prime Minister was to remove all protections for sex from the Sex Discrimination Act. She removed the definitions of male and female, put in gender identity, and the only protections in the SDA now are for people who identify as the opposite sex. So you can thank, the conspiracy, or not the conspiracy, the reasons behind all of this can go back as far and deep as you want to dig. But here in Australia, that was a very important moment in our history when she did that. Because now tribunals and courts are having to deal with frivolous complaints about misgendering and alleged vilification. Truth Speak has been rebranded as hate speech, and calling out males in female spaces has resulted in several people being penalised. There's an increasing number of males signing up for female sporting divisions, all encouraged and protected by the Australian Sports Commission, funded by you and I. A couple of years ago, they issued transgender guidelines that most major sporting bodies actually adopted. Netball, cricket, swimming, athletics, soccer, hockey, tennis, and more. All have policies to protect males in female sports. Why do we have male and female divisions in the first place? Fairness, safety, biology, reality. To accept a male as a woman makes a mockery of womanhood and makes a mockery of the word woman. It negates any need whatsoever to have separate male and female categories if anyone can be whatever they feel like. Because regardless of name changes or the amount of drugs or surgery that a male has, he will always be male. Even lowering testosterone does not change the advantages of bone density, your skeletal shape, heart and lung capacity, blood volume, and fast-twitch muscle fibres. No male can transition to female. And I'm so over hearing in the media or from our politicians that someone has transitioned. No, they have not. They have not. No male. And vice versa, okay? But it's not the same degree of risk that a woman appropriating a male would have. So those who promote this lie are actively harming women and girls. Women and girls are so much more than a feeling or a costume or a drug, and we're certainly not the perversion of a man's sexual fantasy. There's no reason whatsoever for a male body to compete against females in sport, unless the female is participating with full consent in an open or mixed competition. That's the only exception. Males have so many sporting options to choose from. They can participate in the male teams, they can participate in the open, they can participate in the mixed. But no, some of these men want to colonise women's sports as well. Female categories must be for female only. For the sake and safety of and dignity and privacy and respect, we deserve to have the option of playing sport with other girls, other women. And we should never have to be confronted by males in our change rooms. And if any of you have seen or heard Riley Gaines' testimony and Paula Scanlon, it is absolutely horrendous that there were very young teenage girls in the change room with Leah Thomas, William Thomas, who, let it all hang out in front of these girls. In any other situation, we would have that man arrested as a pedophile, and he's been celebrated in America, particularly by the media. Now, if you don't know, this beautiful woman, Deborah Ackerson, let me educate you, because she is one of Australia's most decorated and most successful and most accomplished athletes. She is only one of 2 athletes in the entire Commonwealth that has competed in 5 consecutive Commonwealth Games. A career of 20 years. That's not in shooting, it's in weightlifting. Like, this woman is incredible. She's competed in 2 Olympics, 7 world events. She's won gold in 2006, 3 silvers in 2002, and a bronze in 2010. She's competed in all of these things as she's had children, breastfed them, pregnancy, the whole lot. She is the definition of a strong woman in every way. Now, Deb was forced to compete against the male weightlifter, Gavin Hubbard. He goes by the name Laurel. Now, when Hubbard, he's from New Zealand, was permitted to compete in the female category, all he had to do was change his name, change a couple of legal documents, not compete in the male division for 12 months, and have testosterone levels below 10 nanomoles per litre. Now, Deb and it's not hard to find out, says that an elite female athlete will have between 0.8 and 1.3 nanomoles per litre. He only has to come down to under 10, because men actually have a lot more than that. But he's still going to be somewhere between 7 and 10 times more powerful with the testosterone. But that's just not it. In most sports, and particularly in weightlifting, the size of your hands, your grip matters, the size of your feet, how much surface area is on the ground, your reach, your muscle fibres, and many other advantages were completely disregarded. He didn't even begin to identify as female until he was 34 years old and had already won many titles in the male category. In 2018, in the Commonwealth Games that were at the Gold Coast, Deb, her 5th Commonwealth Games, was so excited for the first time to compete in front of all her family and friends, her home crowd. One of the most decorated athletes in our country's history. Most people don't know her name because all the media asked her was, what's it like to compete against a transgender athlete? And she was told, and as were the other athletes in the village, if you say anything negative, you'll be off the team and out of the village. It just rips my heart out. Deborah Amberson also speaks about the obvious disadvantage that female athletes have in Olympic competition. Kieran Perkins, no, I'm not a fan, okay, sorry. Not sorry. He got together 80 athletes in November last year for a round table to discuss transgender or males in female sports. And Deb was only one of 3 athletes, I believe, that was actually invited. The rest were all trans groups that were invited. She got up and she shared how she had to endure over those 20 years her menstrual cycle, pregnancy and breastfeeding. She talks about how as an Olympic athlete, you work in 4-year cycles, she would lose 1 week a month, which is 3 months a year, which is 1 whole year in a 4-year cycle to her menstrual cycle. And that means that she was at greater risk of injury and had a lower capacity for strength, which no male, particularly Gavin Hubbard, would ever have to experience. Yeah. And Kieran Perkins and the other bureaucrats in the room I feel really passionate about women's sport. I played sport until injuries got the better of me. And I'm probably just saying now, I've had injuries all my life, but the last 4 years I've been really injured. So if you see me on my walking stick tonight and you're worried about me, I'm okay. I have a torn meniscus and a torn ligament, and after 4 years of very severe injury. So I'm very passionate about it. But my middle child, my daughter, she wants a career in sport. And we recently had this come very close to home when we discovered that there was a male playing in a female team in a club that we were associated with. And because I identified him and said, I don't think this is right, I got a visit from the police. And I got served with papers. And I have to now, starting tomorrow, with the vilification complaints going to be mentioned in NCAT, which is the New South Wales Civil Authority Tribunal. It's almost a swear word. So I've got one for one player starting tomorrow, another different player that I identified, that will be starting 2 weeks after that. And then I have to go to Sydney because this guy, sure his mum would have been so proud of him. Good police work to come and tell a 51-year-old disabled, overweight woman that she can't call men. No, she can't say that men can't be women. And that I have an apprehension of violence order, 2 against me. So I just have to laugh. But we redefined so many words, so now we're redefining the word violence. This is insane. It wasn't fun to have police turn up at my door. It wasn't fun to go through this process, knowing that it's probably going to be years and years and years of my life now consumed with these things. Many of you have heard of Bernard Gaynor, who's now been before tribunals for almost 10 years. While Shelton thankfully just won his battle. Yes, so good. 3 years, $250,000 later, and they could still appeal. So I've got 2 of those that I'm about to begin tomorrow morning. But I'm not the only one. Other women are also being forced to engage in legal actions because of the lies perpetrated by gender ideology. Hopefully you've heard or seen of some of these women. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to teach you how to suck eggs or, telling you things you don't know. As I said, I'm just trying to give you this broad stroke picture of this is what's going on in Australia right now. We don't have to look at America or the UK or anywhere else. This is happening right here. So Dr. Gillian Spencer has lodged a complaint with the Queensland Human Rights Commission because she was stood down from the Queensland Children's Hospital because she questioned giving children puberty blockers. She questioned it and she's been called transphobic. She's a senior psychiatrist, very experienced in this area, and she has been stood down for simply saying, I think we need to do some study and research and get evidence-based results. Sal Grover, what a woman. She's fighting in the federal court to show that sex and gender identity are at odds. There's a male called Roxy Tickle, so the case is called Tickle v Giggle. You just couldn't make this stuff up. Roxy Tickle has demanded access to her female-only app, and Sal said no. No, this is for females only. So Tickle is taking her to court, and now they basically have to go and argue. It's a constitutional challenge. It's going to the federal court about is it sex, gender identity? Which one will prevail? Because they're in direct opposition to each other. Sex relies on biology. Gender identity rejects it or denies it. Louise Elliott, what a woman. Hobart City Councillor who's facing legal action for stating men are not women. And women deserve single-sex spaces in bathrooms. She said that at a Let Women Speak event in Tasmania, and she's been called before the tribunal down in Tasmania. She's been accused of inciting hate for saying that men shouldn't be in bathrooms. Moira Deeming, what a hero, what a legend. Hopefully most of you know her name and what she's been through, but she has been treated absolutely abominably by the Victorian Liberal leader John Pesutto for attending the Let Women Speak rally. And I don't know if you saw the news this week, but the organiser, Kelly J. Keane, has issued John Pesutto and his whole leadership team with concerns notices for defamation. So not only does he have to go to court for Moira, but now Kelly J. Keane is also suing him. And I believe others like Angie Jones, who's up there, will also be pursuing that sort of line of action as well. And if any of you have ever met Moira or listened to her for even 1 minute, listen to her for longer, because she's one of the most compassionate, beautiful, logical, reasonable women you will ever hear speak. Not just on this issue, but many, many issues. Angie Jones, who I just mentioned, she's a Melbourne-based mother. She's a self-described left-wing feminist who has also been defamed by the Victorian leaders. She's been harassed, she's been doxxed, she's been intimidated, she's been bullied for speaking out, and she particularly works with and speaks out for marginalised women in prisons and shelters. Jasmine Sussex is a breastfeeding expert who was sacked for stating the plain truth that men can't breastfeed. 20 years as a breastfeeding expert. She was sacked for saying that. Then the E-Safety Commissioner came after her for posting that on Twitter. I could do a whole lot on the E-Safety Commissioner, by the way. Catherine Deves, beautiful woman. She was treated appallingly by the media when she ran in the federal election, and she's constantly trolled, harassed. She's had death threats against her and so much more, all for her fierce defence of women's sex-based rights, particularly in sport. Associate Professor Holly Lawford-Smith has endured targeted harassment at Melbourne University for her left-wing feminist that men cannot be women. But the point is, she will say and I will say, we're about as far on the political spectrum apart as we can get. This is not a left or right issue. This is not an ethnic issue. This is not a religious issue. This is just a plain, human, biological, common sense issue. Activists scream and shout, and particularly we all got together at New South Wales Parliament House in June, and we're next week, week after, about 10 days' time, we'll all be at Canberra in the Federal Parliament House. We're hoping to all come to Perth early next year. And we get these mobs of trans activists screaming at us the most vile obscenities and trans rights, human rights. What human rights don't they have? And why should their rights trample over my rights as a woman? It doesn't make any sense. Of course we've all got human rights, but these slogans are meaningless and empty, and they're just designed to intimidate and bully. Well, try harder, because that ain't going to intimidate or bully me. The media are not my friends, and I have a lot that I could say about them. This was just last week in The Australian, which we would think if any of the media are good, it's The Australian, but read it carefully. The eldest child, Jamie, 16, who is taking puberty blockers and wishes to undergo a mastectomy once he completes his HSC, will live with both parents in accordance with his wishes. No, his doesn't have breasts and can't have a mastectomy. This is our national newspaper lying, and we all know they've lied and lied and lied and lied, but just blatantly lying and gaslighting. Yes, exactly. They do it every day of the week. Every day of the week. They will say, his pregnancy or her penis. A judge in New South Wales, there was a case of a man who exposed himself to a 14-year-old child in the bathrooms, and the judge wrote in the decision when she exposed her penis. How can you trust the legal system when a judge writes that in his decision? Whew. So there's more. I know you know there's more, but I guess the real question is, what can we do? How do we respond to these things? And I will say this over and over till the day I die. It is the truth that is powerful, and it is the truth that will set us free. If you have someone in your circle, and I think if I ask for a show of hands, which I won't do, but everywhere I go now, everybody has someone in their circle who is struggling with some sort of gender issue. Well, that's great, but that's rare. So many people know someone now these days. And I want to say, of course, you must treat individual people with care and compassion and love and concern. But I'll also say that lying to them is not being kind and compassionate and concerned. It is not love to deceive. It is not love to lie. And it is not kind. It is cruel to affirm the lie. So I want to encourage you, be truthful in all of your networks, whether it's in your family, whether it's on social media, whether it's at work, which I know is really hard. So many people tell me about they risk their job if they speak the truth. But I think we risk so much more if we don't. We must speak to the politicians. It is all a numbers game. They only care about the numbers, and they must hear from you. And I think so often, doesn't matter what the issues are, with the civilisationists or whoever else, if we're not talking to the politicians, when they're not hearing our voice, they will not act. I guarantee. And even when they do hear our voice, I know that many times they will not act. But they cannot be without excuse then. Okay, so it's really important, but we have seen some things, and in America in particular, and now in the UK, and in other countries like Sweden and Finland and Norway, the tide is turning. Because people are saying, hands off our kids, back off, get out of our spaces, and we have power when we stand up and do that together. The website, Binary, that I'm a spokesperson for, we have campaigns constantly running. We have fact sheets that you can download. There's videos, there's testimonies, there's story after story after story that you can use to equip yourself if you're not sure about these things. Coming early next year, we'll have a book that's about Australian stories written, shared by Australian families. And we will also have with that some really useful packages of step-by-step of what you can do in approaching medical practitioners, what you can do in approaching your school, what you can do with your local library. Tomorrow night I'm doing another event and I'm going to be very specific about the children and all of those things that we can do, and I'm happy to answer some questions in a moment about that. But the fact is, we have found, I've been doing this for more than 5 years now, that the level of awareness is still very, very low in the community. And that's the biggest challenge that we have, because every time that we wake someone up and they become aware, they are always 100% on board. There's just so few people that actually believe these lies or want to affirm these lies. There's many people who are confused about how to deal with it, and that's a whole other issue, and that's something that we are beginning to address. But I want to end tonight, or end this little bit tonight, before we have a break and get into questions, just to keep this firmly in your mind. No one can change their sex. No one ever has, no one ever will. Don't buy the lie, don't repeat the lie. Be truthful, even though there is a cost. It's worth the cost. I was reading something today about choose your hard. Okay? It's going to be hard to speak the truth, but it's harder not to. At the end of the day, we're going to have a generation of children who are irreversibly harmed. They are the ones that are going to pay the greatest price. And I, as a mother, am not prepared to do nothing on these things. So I might leave it there just for the moment. And yeah, we're doing a break and then questions. Yeah, so it's a lot of information. Like I said, I know a lot of you will know that information, but it's just giving me that broad brush stroke, and then we can get into some more specifics of this is what we can do about it.
Yes, we've got this one working. The truth will set you free, and we all know who is the father of lies. Now, I'm sure everybody's hanging out for a drink after that talk, so we're going to have a little break, about 10-15 minutes, in which you can have a drink. Oh, and ladies, if you want to go to the loo, the ladies' loo is in the hall, in this hall here, and it's got a pink door. And the gentleman's toilet is in the other room, and it is opposite the South African military display. And I see Fran waving her hand. The boys have a blue door. So have a break, have a breather, have a chat to people, and we'll adjourn for questions. We'll recommence the evening, and Kirralie will answer the formal questions which have been submitted.
No worries, man.
Now, our first question is rather complex, and it's been traced a bit, and it is in regards to the treatment of students with gender dysphoria at schools. The school expects other students and teachers to address the student by another name and pronoun. And our questioner asks, what are our rights as parents, students and teachers when we do not agree to call such a student by a different name or pronoun, as that strengthens the lie? We are being asked to lie. Do we have a right to free speech? What is our legal position?
Well, that is a big question. And I would basically say it doesn't matter what your legal rights are. Don't lie. Don't enable the lie. These are your children. They don't belong to the state. They belong to you. And look, there is, as I said, there's going to be a price to pay. I'll tell you a story, and I've got so many like this. A 6-year-old boy was in kindergarten in New South Wales, had his little mate Billy, and then there was a school assembly, and their class was told Billy will be coming to school with Sally next Monday, and you will refer to Billy with she, her pronouns. And this little kid went home and said to his mum, Billy's now going to be called Sally, we've got to treat him as if he's a girl, And you know, like a 6-year-old is trying to work this out. Mum says, well, look, you know, we don't believe that. Billy isn't becoming a girl, but it's just a name, so call Billy Sally. Like, he's your mate, like he's your friend. That's fine, do that. And as 6-year-olds, some 60-year-olds would do, he went to school the next Monday and said, well, Sally, I'll call you Sally, but my mum says that you're still a boy, and I'm not still a boy. That's funny, but you know what happened to that kid? He got suspended for 3 days for being transphobic. A 6-year-old in kindergarten got suspended for 3 days. So, this is not easy. Like, this isn't an easy answer. And look, the law hasn't really been tested in this either. We've seen cases in Canada and the US and the UK where teachers or parents have been prosecuted for these things, but we're really only just starting to come into these waters here. And the worst laws at the moment are in Victoria, but if Alex Greenwich in New South Wales gets his way, it will be even worse. And it's quite alarming, and you know, they want to penalise parents who don't affirm their children in this way, which I, you know, stupid words. I should never even say the word affirmation in this context. So I would encourage. It's always about relationship as well. So have a relationship with your school. If you're a parent, make sure. I was just talking to a dad whose child is going from primary school into high school, and he's going to, you know, get involved with the parents' committee or get on the board, do whatever it takes so that you have a voice in that context and you can stand up for what's truth and what's right. If you're a teacher, I understand it's a little bit more complicated and you might, you know, not be able to lose your job. And again, I can't tell you what price, the price to pay. So as a teacher, whether it's through your unions or through a relationship with the school principal, whatever it is. But again, I say to you, if you're not prepared to pay the price will be greater anyway. It will be greater because children are being harmed. And someone like Dr. Gillian Spencer just gives me so much courage and inspiration that she's a senior psychiatrist at Queensland Children's Hospital. She's dealing with these children day in and day out, and she's prepared to lay her job on the line for the sake of their lives. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, like, it all, you know, the word feeling gets thrown around a lot, but these children are going to be really harmed and damaged. And there's studies that are showing now that just the social transitioning, so if we do use the pronouns and allow children to change their name and change their appearance, a large percentage of them are then going on to puberty blockers, then going on to cross-sex hormones. So it's really essential. And the other thing that we found is really effective is numbers again. Get groups of parents together, get groups of teachers together. Okay, did I answer all of that?
Well, there's more. More questions.
Oh yeah, more questions. So basically, in a nutshell, strength in numbers, get armed and equipped with the facts. As I said, we're going to actually have fact sheets that lay out the process step by step, and hopefully they'll be available as a back-to-school pack next year. In the meantime, we do have some resources already on our website, but if you keep to just that really simple truth, 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 and the harm on the other side that's being done if we affirm the lie. So, oh, and also please feel free to contact me. There are support groups, but they're not highly publicised for obvious reasons, because people get bullied, ostracised and attacked, and so they need safe places to have these groups. So I may be able to put you in touch with other people who feel the same way, and we're trying to develop more of that as well. So, yeah.
Now the next question, it's a continuation from the questions from the same person. What are my rights as a parent when non-biblical moral values regarding sex/gender and sexual conduct are taught in a private Christian school in the subject of Christian life studies? Can I ask that my child not attend Christian life studies class? Am I allowed to remove my child from Christian life studies class if the school does not agree? And if my child was in a public school, i.e. a government school, and such content is taught, would I be allowed to remove my child from those lessons?
Home school. That's my simple and my very passionate answer. Full disclosure, I have homeschooled my 3 children who are now 15, 18 and 20. Homeschool. I sincerely do believe in homeschooling. And it's going to become more and more essential as time goes on. In the meantime, again, I'll say to you, you have authority over your children. Your children do not belong to the state, and it must be challenged when the state is doing this. Now, it's not easy. There are many parents currently caught up in the courts, I will say, over these issues, and it is a very traumatic, very difficult time. Organisations like the HRLA, the Human Rights Law Alliance, are doing fabulous work in this area, and there are other lawyers. I know there's a lot of broken families where husbands and wives are fighting against one another over their children and over their rights to, one parent will be wanting to put the child on puberty blockers, the other won't, and these are all happening in the court. So I think it's really complex and it's very difficult, but first of all, have that relationship with your school principal, first and foremost. Make sure you keep those lines of communication open, express your feelings and get other parents to do the same thing with you. It will make some principals rethink it. If you need a biblical theology, if you're at a Christian school, myself, the ACL, others will give you that biblical theology to lay it out very plainly and clearly that it is anti-Christ to teach children these things. I have no worries about giving you that if that's what you need in a public school. Again, I've heard of a lot of parents when they've come together and spoken to the principals and said this is not acceptable, the principals have stepped back. Some don't. You may need to find another school for your child because there's too much at stake to just let that happen.
Another question from a gentleman sent in this afternoon. What is Binary's stance regarding high-profile transsexual women in public life who continue to be referred to simply as women or female by nearly everyone in the media and government? And Julia Gillard's recent waffling response when asked, what is a woman? And can some women have penises?
Can some women have penises? No. Never. So I guess when I started out on this journey, I tried to be respectful and call trans women trans women. I wouldn't call trans women women, but trans women. I don't even use that terminology anymore. Trans women are men. There's male and there's female and that's it. I think that language is very important, and we've seen this really concerted effort to erase woman, breastfeeding, mother, like all these words from the language. So we need to draw really strong boundaries and make sure we use those words and we use them accurately. And then when there are very high profile people in the media or celebrities or whatever they are, again, we don't have to be, I do provoke, I will say that. I know that but that's a political instrument. Mockery and parody is a political instrument that I use, but I would not, if Bruce/Caitlyn Jenner was here in the room, I would treat him as an individual who deserves respect and dignity as an individual, but I will not entertain him as a female. Does that make sense? And I think it's really important. It makes us uncomfortable. But you know what? We're not the ones that should feel uncomfortable. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not doing anything wrong by observing fact. And I have, women in particular, all of us, but we have that ability to recognise male and female. Even tiny little children do it because it's part of our survival skills and ability to recognise the sexes. So we've got to get past this feeling of I'm doing something wrong, or I'm awkward, or I'm uncomfortable in this, because we're not doing anything wrong. It's okay to state facts, as I said, to be kind to the person in front of you, but you don't have to compromise the truth or reality to be kind. That's not that's what we have to do. In terms of Julia Gillard, as I said earlier, she is responsible largely for what is going on in this country at the moment, and I think her waffling 4-minute whatever that was the other day, if you haven't seen it, go and have a look on YouTube when she was asked what is a woman. She said it was a gotcha question. No, it's something that's really important for people in high office to be able to answer, but it was a gift. It was a real gift to this country because it's now been plastered all over the news. It has been plastered everywhere. It's something that I've been advocating for since 2019 when we realised that there was no definition for sex in the Sex Discrimination Act. So, no, Julia, and anyone else who asks, women do not have a penis.
Last formal question, and we do have time for a question from the floor. Are the trans activists sending you to court, like they do to Bernard Gaynor, so that you will never have time or funds to continue to spread the word about the so-called gender lies?
Lawfare. It is lawfare, and that might be their hope, but they won't succeed in that because already what I've seen, what Sal Grover has seen, what others have seen is that the Australian public is fed up with this and they will come to the party. And where I am a spokesperson in public and other people can't be as public, they will put their money where their mouth is. And so, yes, this is lawfare. Yes, the process is the punishment. This has been going on. My legal cases have only just started in February. But already tens of thousands of dollars that we've been able to fundraise. A lot of time. I've lost sleep. I feel stressed. I feel anxious that I could stand before a judge who says her penis. But I will also say I will not back down. I will not, this is the hill I will die on. Absolutely will die on because... one of the most basic fundamental truths that affect every area of our life. I have 3 beautiful children. I have 3 foster children. I'm hoping for grandchildren. Not yet. My oldest is only 20, but they'll come. And I'm unashamedly Christian. I know not everyone in the room might be, but for me, Jesus said of himself, he's the way, the truth, and the life. And so here's the truth. The truth wins. I'm 100% confident. I may or may not live to see it, don't really care. I'm going to be found in the truth and nowhere else. And I know that courage breeds courage. And I look at the people around the world like J.K. Rowling who, theologically, politically, have very little in common. But she's a woman who's standing up for women, so I'll stand by her side. I've got women today on Twitter who I was attacked by a lot of trans activists as I am every day, and I've got rad, femme, lesbians, and everyone in between coming to my defence. And I just think this is, as I said before, it's not left or right. It's not ethnicity. It's not religion. This is just basic, fundamental human reality. And I'm right. I'm right. They can try as much as they like, but we're going to win. And Bernard Gaynor and Lyle Shelton and others give me so much inspiration to be able to do that. And all of you guys coming out on a Wednesday, I think it is, a Wednesday night, we're going to do this. We're going to win. We're going to win.
Thank you, Kirralie.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, of course you can. Playing with the mic.
Sorry, I just want to say too, there is mockery and parody in what I say, but I really do have great compassion for people who have gone through this, or the detransitioners and desisters who, we've got decades ahead of us of the repair that's going to have to be done for these people. And I do have great compassion and concern for them, and it is for that reason as well. I'm not here going, we're going to win because I want them to lose. We're going to win because I want them to win. I want them to win. I want them to be set free. I want them to have full lives. I want them to embrace the reality and not keep going down these pathways that are hurting them. So I think that's really important to keep that front and centre as well. This isn't an us against them. This is truth against lies, and that's really important to keep front of mind.
Kirralie. Is there anyone from the floor who wants to ask a question? Now, I'll go 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. You say first. Oh yeah, so the video of this seminar will be on freedomactivism.com and also previous seminars of the Civilisationists, and Joe will send you a link through email of the video. Yes. Might get banned from YouTube, of course. I'll put it on Rumble and Odyssey. So, but yeah, you know, YouTube, you can never trust those guys, can you?
Right, now Mrs. Fairley has a question, Joe.
I would like to know, when we leave here tonight, how do we support you?
Yep. Binary.org.au. Sign up. I send out a weekly email so that can keep you up to date with what's happening. It will take you hours and hours to go through everything that's on the website. Can you hear me all right? So there's a tab called campaigns, so you can sign petitions. There's fact sheets that you can download and share. There's blogs. There's more than 1,000 blogs, I think, that we've done. There's so much information and resources. If any of you, or if you know anyone whose family is experiencing these issues, feel free to put them in touch with me. Like I said, we're still collating stories for the book of Australian stories. We want to be able to particularly give them to every politician in this country to show them that this is real. The ACL have taken some of the parents to politicians, and I'm going to partner with them and keep working to get those parents to those politicians. Donations, obviously. But for an example, some of the campaigns we run next week in New South Wales, we will start a campaign against Alex Greenwich's conversion therapy bill, and that will involve masses of people emailing, phone calls, and contacting their local members.
But who reads them? I mean, we send them in. Who's going to? Are they going to be taken any notice?
Well, they get some do, yes. The campaigns that Binary have run have really led the way in a lot of ways, and similar to ACL, we shut down their offices basically because we bombard them with that many phone calls that they will then ring and say, stop people calling us because we can't get any work done, or when their inbox is flooded with the emails and they can't actually get to the emails they need to get to. So they are effective. It doesn't always change their mind, but it opens the door for us to then go and have some conversations with them, to lobby in that sense, and we're really committed to doing that. So these things are not an overnight solution or answer, okay? They're not by any means, but we just keep pushing. So this year, the focus obviously for me is winning these court cases and getting the book up and running. So there are two main priorities, but as things like the conversion therapy bills come up, and a lot of things are going behind the scenes with my team in trying to support families that are going through this at the moment, developing other resources like the fact sheet. So the bottom line that everyone can do is raise awareness. All of you have got someone in your life that doesn't understand these issues that you can talk to. That's the most important thing.
And one question over there.
Now, Kirralie,
and one last one over there. I think that's all we've got.
with men and women's sports, why don't the women then say, right, fine, we're going to boycott? And that there's nothing for the men to compete in. If all the women turn around and go, well, that's it, we're not competing.
Yep, and that's a really
Why
good...
don't they do that?
No, I understand. So the question was, why don't women just not play against the men? And I'll give you two kind of answers or examples. So in Deborah Atkinson's case, there was talk. They all could have just said, we're not going to compete. But Deborah had competed for 20 years in her chosen sport. She had sacrificed so much over those 20 years. Her family and friends were all there in the audience to cheer her on to lift weights. And while, you know, it may or may not have been effective, she was told if she protested, she'd be out of the village and wouldn't even get the opportunity at all. So there's that sort of threat. I know for a fact that there are team sports at the moment. I'll use New South Wales, that's my home state, where the federations have not only said, will the girls be suspended from playing, they'll be fined. They'll be fined.
Well, yeah.
So no, and I know, and like you and I have had enough years around the sun to go, it's worth paying that price. for an 18, 19, 20-year-old who's just seen the Matildas do something incredible in our nation, they're going, I just want to play sport. And what do we need our girls to play sport. I don't want girls. Well, I ended up like this because I play sport. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a complex thing. I would say more than that. Where are the peak bodies? Where are the officials? Where are the dads even? They're the ones that need to stand up.
Where are the men leading this? But not just that, Kirralie, but okay, team sport is different, but in an individual sport, the women know they will never, ever win.
And we're seeing some great women like the swimmers in America. We're seeing some cyclists now. Martina Navratilova is really going to town on this. So I think that we're about to see it turn. I really do think that pendulum has swung now, and that when you've got women like Martina waking up, there'll be more and more women. One great example, I'll encourage you in this, disc golf. I didn't even know that was a thing. But the women's disc pro, and it's a pro tour in America. I suppose in America they have everything. The pro disc women's tour, they did that. They all went, no, we're not. And they held a press conference, and in a couple of states, the trans people are not allowed to compete, or the men are not allowed to compete with the women. But that's going up to the Supreme Court and all that sort of stuff. But there is a strength in numbers to do that. But just keep in mind, it is very difficult, and especially if we're asking teenage girls to do that, they don't have the maturity and understanding yet.
Strength of character.
That's right. It's a hard thing. It's hard to be called names. It's hard to be... My daughters have been called every name under the sun. They've been videoed and told that they'd be put on Facebook, you know.
No one else.
Oh, yeah,
We only have time for one.
Well, Wes, can you ask Kirralie directly?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kirralie. Can you comment on the fact that the gender movement is highly funded, and do they actually fund all the puberty blockers in order for the kids to start transitioning, and who else do they fund?
Yeah, look, I mean, everything's connected. Everything's connected when it comes to all of this. But it is an industry, and anything, at the moment we put medicalised into something, we know that it's a money-making machine. We know that there's an industry behind it. We know that there's one world government. All of those things definitely behind it. Whether they started it or are capitalising on it, there's a little bit of who knows, but the reality is this is happening. It's not going, like, there's big money and powerful players behind it without a doubt, and we're not going to be able to take it from the top down. We're going to have to do the grassroots up.
Right now, I can see some more questions. What I suggest you do is address Kirralie directly over tea and coffee and snacks, because we are running out of time. I know Tyler down there's got a question, Mr. Abetz and Ian. So you're going to be playing Kirralie.
That's okay.
Let's adjourn now.
Go and have an informal cuppa and have a chat to Kirralie directly if you have a question, which you don't have to share with the rest of the team. So, earmark a few people. Kirralie won't be left alone, I can assure you. Give the lady time to have a bite, and in the meantime, please express your thanks.
It's very important that you do stay for a talk. One of the things that Civilizationists are strong on is that a lot of people have feelings not just on gender but all sorts of issues which they cannot talk to their friends about. This is an ideal opportunity to talk to like-minded people. You can be damn sure that nearly everybody here shares your thoughts on most items. Now, I do hope you've enjoyed the night. I think she's just fantastic. You all do. Incredibly brave and marvellous. Just when you leave, can you please leave your name tags on the table? And there are forms there. Grab them. And thank you very much for coming. and the biscuits are very good. I made some of them.